Hello, hello, brothers and sisters. Welcome to the show. I have with me a veteran journalist, Larry Ojong. We're going to talk about the hot issues of the day. Today, there's a whole lot of stuff you guys want to know about. So I brought Larry Ojong to shed light on most of these issues. For those who don't know, Larry Ojong doesn't really need an introduction, especially for folks from Cameroon and Ambazonia. He's a known quantity. He's been in Sierra TV, but before then even, I remember in '82, when Biya became president of La République du Cameroon, Larry Ojong was one of those students from ECG who went to Mvumeka to report. They came up with a show titled L'Appel du Destin, the Call of Destiny. Okay? So today, you guys have a hot issue. Paul Biya, is he dead or is he alive? We're going to start with that. So Larry, without further ado, introduce yourself.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Larry Ojong. I've been a journalist for 40 years. I am from French Cameroon, and I know French Cameroon very well because, well, my territory, Southern Cameroon, was colonized and occupied by French Cameroon in 1961. So basically, I know the playbook of French Africa and the political chicanery of what they do when a president disappears. By the way, Paul Biya has been in power for 42 years, 1982. And at one point he said, "Je suis le meilleur élève du président français." That is an African president saying, "I am the best student of the French president." Mitterrand at that time. So, and this succession in Cameroon is actually occurring at a very propitious moment where Robert Bourgi, who is like the mafia chief of French Africa, has just published a book. He calls it Ils savent que je sais tout. They know that I know all.
Franc-Afrique.
Franc-Afrique is like the Sicilian mafia, the French mafia in Africa. This gentleman was the one, they call him the Missi Dominici, the guy who used to carry the briefcases from African leaders to go give it to the French president. French presidents have been shaking down African leaders, collecting money to make them stay in power. So when you see an African president who's been in power for that long, like Paul Biya, who's been in power for 42 years, know that he has been feeding the trough, the French Republic. So basically, we are going to use a very relaxed standard, that of the preponderance of the evidence. Because if you notice what has been happening for the past week, the government of Cameroon, starting with the troubadour, the minstrel, the court minstrel, Mr. Famen Dongo, who used to be my director at the School of Journalism, when the Gabonese director was chased away. He came to power just when Paul Biya came to power. And we went to Mvomeka and wrote a newspaper article where he said destiny had called Biya in power. But he also said very clearly that Paul Biya has been in power thanks to black magic. So you see the occultism of Cameroon. Now, answering Prince's question, is Paul Biya dead or alive?
Thank you.
You'll be surprised with my answer. It doesn't really matter. What matters is, what are Cameroonians going to do now that the vacancy in power, which has been latent for more than 3 years, is now evident? Because we say in English, habeas corpus, show me the body. If he is alive, show him. Let him come talk in a podcast like I and you are talking. So, but if you see the circumstantial evidence that is being made available, Grégoire Ona threatens, Atanganji threatens, Diongute threatens, Famendongo threatens. Anybody who talks about the death of the president is committing a crime of lèse majesté. and he will be prosecuted. That is an indication that Paul Biya is no more. Now, I believe that he actually beat his own record by 4 months because 20 years ago he said, "Ceux qui s'intéressent à mes funérailles, je leur donne rendez-vous dans 20 ans." Let me translate that in English. He said, "Those who are interested in my funeral, I give them an appointment in 20 years." And the 20 years passed on the 17th of June. So he has beaten his own predictions by 4 months. And I can tell you now that Paul Biya is no more. Now, but the point is, what are Cameroonians going to do?
But before that, it looks like what is happening now is gré à gré, comme on dit en français. Qu'est-ce qui se passe derrière? Il faut expliquer ce qui se passe normalement dans la zone francophone.
Yes, okay.
Expliquez.
Prince is asking me to explain what is happening in the background. Because you see, every time you go to a meeting, if you don't know the agenda, then you are in the menu. The Cameroonian people are on the menu right now because the agenda is to create the suspense while they're sorting things out. And let me give you some historical background. When Houphouët Boigny, the doyen, the dean of the French imperialism in Africa, the president of Ivory Coast, the president of the richest African country, the highest producer of cocoa and coffee in West Africa, died. It took France 8 months to announce it. Why did that take so long? When Omar Bongo, the most generous African president who feeds the trough of the Fifth French Republic with money, with bags of money, died, it took more than 8 months before it was announced. When Kabila died, they took his corpse to Zimbabwe and said, "Oh, the president is still suffering. He's in the hospital." And they closed the borders before they announced it. So they are now preparing because there is no agreement on the succession in Cameroon. And this succession is particularly tenuous.
What about Gifenji, the president of the Senate?
Well, guess
what?
Is
he not going to succeed Biya?
That is a good question, Prince. Cameroon likes to create a veneer of stability to give the impression that, oh, well, everything has been laid out clearly. If the president is not capable of ruling, if there's a vacancy in power, the president of the Senate will take over for 40 days. But guess what? The president of the Senate is a vegetable. The president of the National Assembly is a vegetable. So what are they doing now? They are planning to bring Paul Biya's in-law, le Professor Robert Nkili, to take over. And they've made sure they ask people like Dion Gute, the prime minister in name only, and Atanganji, and Gregoire Owona, and Famen Dongo, only to continue threatening. Those who talk about the health of the president are rusticated. This is how backward French Central Africa is still.
What about Ferdinand Gongo?
Ferdinand Gongo has been the de facto president of the country, ruling in lieu of Chantal Biya, whom people claim is his sister, but really everybody knows is his girlfriend. Now, this is the little scandal. Paul Biya has had prostate cancer for the longest time, and he has had erectile dysfunction. So, Ngongo has actually been helping him. This is the truth. Because they said, well, Chantal, you know what?
They
they told him, Chantal, you have to respect yourself. We know you used to be a call girl, but we don't want you flirting all around. Get one man and stay stable with him. So he picked Ngongo. So Ngongo has been ruling through what they call in French, les hautes instructions, the high instructions of the president. So the story is that during COVID, Paul Biya was in the room, and Chantal would get inside the room and come out and just say, well, this is what the president has said. And Gongo would go and announce it. So Cameroon has not been governed for a long time. Every minister is in his own fiefdom, ruling the way they like, and have been stealing money like hell. So Cameroon is really a kleptocracy, a government of thieves by thieves for thieves.
What about Laurent Esso? Lui aussi, il donnait les autres institutions, n'est-ce pas? Quand il était secrétaire général à la présidence.
Well, you see, Cameroon is a very curious country. Paul Biya actually appoints ministers without knowing their faces. He's surprised to see them. I don't know the last time he really held a cabinet meeting, but Laurent Esso is a baron. He's an apparatchik of the party. He has his own fiefdom. He has his own strength. He controls the Sawa. He had been former cabinet director of the cabinet. And it is rumored, because this is the problem with Cameroon. Cameroon is a black box. There is no way for you to do a principled fact-finding investigation in Cameroon because everything is closed. So we use circumstantial evidence. It is believed that Laurent Esso is the one who helped Paul Biya kill his first wife, Jean-Irene Biya. And so Paul Biya considered him an untouchable quantity. So this is a fight for power now. Now, the North is claiming that this time power must go to the North, and they are not negotiating. They are getting ready. They believe in the principle because they've seen the Ambazonians. See, we, the Ambazonians, have realized that we have exhausted all the legal measures to solve this problem. We have gone to the Nigerian Federal Court. We have gone to the Abuja Court of Human Rights. We have been declared a people. But since Cameroon is a lawless nation and has refused to sign the Rome Accords, which created the International Criminal Court, they are like a lawless nation. So the only solution that is going to occur in Cameroon is what Bismarck prescribed. If the great problems of the day cannot be solved by parliamentary speeches and debates, they'll be solved by blood and iron. So I am thinking that there's going to be real bloodshed in Cameroon. That is my prediction. It's an unfortunate prediction, but when you look at the way political regimes, dictatorial political regimes have evolved in Africa, it is more likely than not that this succession will end in a civil war.
Okay. Then what about the French interest?
The French interest is not a specific interest because the French right and the French left have been fighting. If, as Robert Bourgi explains very well in this book, the French Gaullists, who are the right-wing people, have their interest in going behind the official diplomacy and collecting rent, money, like shaking down African leaders and collecting money to make them stay in power. They did that with Mobutu. They did that with Blaise Compaoré. They did that with Bongo. That is why those regimes, Sassou Nguesso, remain in power, and they trick the election, they rig the election to let them stay in power. Now, during that time, there are all kinds of conflicts back in France. Le patronat français, the business people, people like Bolloré, who has a lot of interest in Cameroon, like in the railway. He bought the railway. People like Castel, who owns the breweries, they are fighting. Each of them has its own candidate. So coming to a compromise is not going to be very easy, particularly because in Cameroon, the French, from General Lamberton, Colonel Lamberton, they said, the Bamilekis, who are the majority, who are like 30% of the population, and they have the highest reproduction rates, are now more than 40% of the population. If you allow free and fair elections in Cameroon, Camto will win. And the French do not like Camto because the Bamilekis are very enterprising and they are going to frustrate French businesses in Cameroon. So we are in for the tough time in Cameroon, in my humble estimation.
Marine Le Pen.
Marine Le Pen has an interest in terms of the fact that he supports those who give him money, her money, to support her political party. You see, before the laws that limit political contribution were brought to France, France has been financing its political parties through basically bribery, corruption, by taking money from third world leaders. So if you build a personal relationship with Marine Le Pen in Cameroon, he's going to support your candidature and he's going to be fighting to lobby for you in Cameroon for you to take over. But right now, people are thinking that the French want to do what they did in Chad, where Emmanuel Macron went and imposed Muhammad Kaka Debi, the son of Idris Deby, who died in a shootout among his generals. And people are suspicious that that could happen to Cameroon. Now, the problem is whether Cameroonians, who are now really very informed and enlightened, are going to accept that.
So now we have the Frankies. So the Frankies equation. How possible would it be for Frank Biya to take over?
You see, Frank Biya is a very negligible quantity in terms of the fact that He doesn't have the charisma that people like Ali Bongo had, or For Eyadema had, or Joseph Kalibila had. Now, Frank also has a serious issue because he and Chantal Biya are in a big battle. I just want to remind you that Chantal Biya was brought to the presidential palace by Frank Biya because Chantal Biya was dating his friend, Philippe Mataga's son, the foreign minister's son. So when his father saw Chantal, he decided to marry Chantal. They were all scandalized, and he has never respected this woman. So he has actually slapped this woman once. So there is a conflict between the Frank network and the Chantal network, the Ngongo network and the Chantal network, and the Mvondo and Ayolo network, which is part of the Bulu who want to maintain power. Now, the Northerners are making it very clear that this time power has to go up to the north. But the Bamlikis are also making it very clear that we must have free and fair elections. And that is a pipe dream because in Cameroon, there have never been free and fair elections.
Then what about the Bamenda boy that was claimed to have been a boyfriend or husband of Chantal, who was driving a taxi in Yaoundé and Biya's people killed him?
Yes, you see, the problem of Cameroon has to do with a cultism, which has to do with sex and sex orgies and the domination of sex cults. There is this whole story in Cameroon that is really incomprehensible to the Westerners, that for you to get an appointment in Cameroon, you have to be sodomized. And it's strange for men because how can that happen? But this is what everybody says in Cameroon. And there's a preponderance of evidence that those who refuse to accept to be sodomized so that they should be dominated by the leader or the people in power, they get rusticated, they are removed from power. Now, Chantal is a call girl. This woman, she has a third grade education, and she was selling in a bar, and so she was really, to put it mildly, she was a call girl, not to say a prostitute, but she really had so many people who have slept with her. And every time you said you have slept with her, now that she became the president's wife, they just killed you. He had a whole network of people who killed you. So this is where there's a problem. The gentleman who had twins with Chantal, the first children of Chantal, are really Ambazonians. We lay that claim that they are Ambazonians, but their father was killed. And even Teyu, the journalist who wrote La Belle de la République, Chantal Biya, de la Rue au Palais, the beauty of the Republic, Chantal Biya, from the street to the palace. He was killed. He died in strange circumstances. And the place not to go as a Cameroonian or an Ambazonian who is challenging the dictatorship in Cameroon is Europe, because the French network is very strong. I want to remind you that in the 1960s, they killed Felix Roland Moumi. They put a French journalist, he's called Bechtel, who pretended that he was going to conduct an interview for Felix Moumi, and put cyanide in his coffee and killed him. So there's a tendency, we Ambazonians are even suspecting that they may try a way to kill Cho Ayaba in Norway because that's what they want to do. They have a philosophy called isolement et étouffement. We isolate you and then we asphyxiate the movement. We kill the movement by removing it from, by depriving it of oxygen. That's to say, we make sure that the people in the ground are not knowing where their leader is. They get frightened and then they abandon. But that is not going to happen with the Southern Cameroonians.
And that's what they did with UPC, right?
They destroyed the UPC, they infiltrated the UPC, they bought people in the UPC, they followed the UPC to southern Cameroons and killed them and pretended that they were maquisards. Maquisard is a French word for terrorists. And you must notice in colonial history, every time you are called a terrorist, know that you are a nationalist and you are a threat. So what do? They diabolize you, they vilify you, they give you bad names in the media, but eventually you come out. Mandela was a terrorist for a long time. So this is what is happening to Ambazonians, to Southern Cameroonians. By the way, I am going to be revealing how the government of Cameroon sent so much money here to bribe the leaders of Southern Cameroon.
Go ahead. How did they bribe them?
Well, I met Judas Iscariot of Ambazonia, the man who told the ambassador here that he knew all the leaders and he could bribe them for them to stop this movement. And so a lot of money was sent to Washington, as it was sent to Brussels and the European capitals, to corrupt these leaders. And that is where there is a serious question. Prince.
Do you know, can you name some of the leaders who are corrupted?
Yes, of course.
The ambassador leader. Name them. Come on.
I'm going to be naming names because I am not a man who fears, but I'm not going to reveal my source because my source is still ready to give me some information. The principal person who was at the origin of this corruption is Ngu Santos. Ngu Santos is the one who was calling people to come and meet Ufe Chinje, the lady who is a rector at the Ngaoundere University, who actually collected most of the money and came here. Now, the Cameroon embassy has been involved in so much money laundering that the last ambassador was actually recalled because he was involved in money laundering. So what they do is
what was his name?
What was this guy's name? Atangana. Fue Atangana. Fue Atangana was involved in a lot of money laundering, and the State Department asked
and was sleeping with people's women.
Well,
I'm going to give you names too.
that one really doesn't concern me. I don't care who's sleeping with who. I care who is screwing the people of Southern Cameroon and the people of Cameroon. And my job as a journalist is to reveal all the information that I have. And now that there is going to be a civil war in Cameroon because of the botched succession, what is important is how can we enlighten the population? Because for a democracy to survive, there must be an informed public. And we are happy, Prince, that you guys in the media are informing Cameroonians about their rights and the need for them to fight for their rights and the need for them to stop this inferiority complex that they have regarding the French, to allow the French to decide what will prevail in Cameroon.
Yeah, then the way these guys, you say that La République is an expert in communication. You look at the way they use rumor. You know, in journalism, they said there's no smoke without fire. When you look at rumor, how can you shed light on this phenomenon?
Yeah, the phenomenon of rumor has now been weaponized with misinformation and disinformation. And with a lot of AI available, there are possibilities for creating real fakes, which will look very real. But so far, the government of Cameroon has not been able to do a good job about that, because a lot of Cameroonians who are in strategic locations all over the world have their cell phones. And every cell phone camera is a radio station. It's a TV station.
But don't you think these guys, this time, they have really failed in the communication battle?
Of course.
Because to me, it looks like the whole thing is a fiasco.
Yes, it has always been. It's just been brute force in Cameroon. Notice Atanganji threatening the media. That notice Grégoire Ona threatening. Notice Famendongo claiming that anybody who talks about the health of the head of state is committing a treasonable crime. That cannot hold in the 21st century. Those are 17th century tactics of Machiavelli, and clearly they are failing, because clearly they cannot present Paul Biya. And now we have seen the cognitive decline of Paul Biya within the years. You remember when he came to Washington, D.C., Biden invited him here. He came to the hall, and he could not even recognize where he was. He had a situational discordance. He didn't even know where he was. And he was asking, est-ce qu'il y a des gens importants ici? Are there important people here? They say, yes, Mr. President, it's your time to speak. And well, it's by a mystery that he actually went and read his speech. But another thing that I wanted to remark, Prince, is that, you see, Paul Biya had made it very clear regarding the Southern Cameroonian issue that nous avons tenté de les assimiler, mais ça n'a pas marché. That is such a very honest admission. It's like a guy who commits a murder, goes to a toilet, a bathroom, and he's having a pee and says, well, I really killed him. Thank God he's gone.
Mo Ibrahim. Yes. He said that in front of Mo Ibrahim.
Yes, Mo Ibrahim, during this interview where he was, because he's used to only reading speeches and cannot really admit because he's a liar. He has nothing to say. He really admitted, nous avons tenté de les assimiler, ça n'a pas marché. And Cameroonians who are in their 60s like me will remember French by radio. They were trying to teach us French, and make us become French people. And de Gaulle said it clearly. As long as you allow your English-speaking Cameroonians to continue speaking English, they will never be Frenchmen. So this is the problem. We have a superior culture, the Anglo-Saxon parliamentary democratic culture. Our political culture is superior to that of the French. The French have an imperial presidency. The president rules by decree, and nobody can argue. But we are more open-minded, and that's why clearly we cannot be part of French Cameroon. And by the way, Southern Cameroon is larger than 18 countries in the world, in Africa. 18 countries, twice larger than Israel. We have all the strategic resources. There's no reason why we should not become a country. And that's why Southern Cameroonians, the next stage in that struggle is to make sure that the Supreme Court will make a declaratory judgment. They have to go to the United States Supreme Court, for those of us who are American citizens, make sure that the Supreme Court will lay out the facts and the law to show that our movement is a self-determination movement and it's not a terrorist movement. That is the next stage in the struggle.
Then why can you not sue La République du Cameroon in America?
Well, they are a sovereign nation. By the Geneva Conventions, they are sovereign, and the United States does not have jurisdiction over them. The only thing the United States can do is to put pressure.
Okay.
So they don't have legal jurisdiction to drag them to a court in the United States.
Okay.
Yeah.
They cannot drag them to an international court either.
The Cameroon is an outlaw nation. They refuse to sign the Rome Accords, so they are not part of the ICC.
Okay.
That is the conundrum where they are now. That's why when Cho Ayaba is in Norway and people are talking about justice, no, that is not justice. That is European French persecution. They are trying to silence Cho Ayaba because he refused to take the bribes that were given to Amazonian leaders in America and Europe. That is the truth.
So who are the leaders who took the bribe?
Sako took money.
Okay.
Chris Anu took money.
Okay.
Santos took money. My source did not give me some other names. Ebenezer Akangwa took money.
Wow.
So at least 4 of those leaders, that is why they cannot come. I want them to come out and say that I have never taken money from the government of Cameroon.
We're challenging those leaders.
Yes.
Come to this show and defend yourself.
Yes, tell us. Some of them have traveled. I have had testimonial evidence, and I have had concurrent verification from third parties who traveled with them to have meetings with Eko. For example, Ebenezer Akangwa held a meeting with Eko, who is in jail now at the Trump Hotel, and did not report to Southern Cameroonians. Now, everybody told me that he was begging for Eko to disburse the money that the United Nations had given for him for his torture, had asked the government of Cameroon to pay him for his torture. So that's what he was now doing. He was now going for the money. You see, at one point, a revolutionary leader will either gravitate towards the bullet or towards a crumb of bread. And I think Frundi, Ebenezer Akangwa, Chris Anu, Sako, Santos have gravitated towards a crumb of bread rather than the bullet.
So which means all these leaders have been discredited.
Of course. We are in the winnowing process of leadership in the Southern Cameroon.
Okay.
When the government of Cameroon goes to Nigeria and illegally abducts 10 other members of the Ayuktabe, Shufai Binglo, eminent professors who were only advocating. You can talk about incitement. It's not incitement. The Nigerian High Court in Abuja ruled that Nigeria should not consider Southern Cameroon as part of French Cameroon, and Nigeria should follow the case for the independence and self-determination of Southern Cameroon to the International Court of Justice.
Okay.
But for political reasons, they have not done that. And do you know why?
Why?
Because the Nigerians are scared that if they support the Amazonian cause,
Biafra.
the Cameroonian government will help the Biafrans. Because really, Biafra could have won the war because General de Gaulle was supporting Biafra in the 1960s. Bongo, his proxy, and Ufwed Buenyi were all supporting Biafra. The only person who blocked Biafra and refused to give them the beach head was Amadou Ahidjo because of his Fulani loyalty to Yakubu Gowon.
Yes.
So those are some of the things we're going to be talking about in the next show.
No, that's very good. At least I'm happy you guys have watched this show. I think Larry Ojong has really addressed a lot of hot issues. You guys know that Yeah, Biya is missing in action. You saw the video talking about Biya being dead. So whether you've seen the body or not, from this show you can tell that there will be no body. Okay, you're not going to see anybody. So now just know that behind the scenes they are making preparations to impose a leader for Cameroon. So are you guys going to just sit and watch?
And when that leader is imposed, that's when we are going to have the funeral. But Cameroonians are really saying that, Paul Biya, you are not going to be buried in Cameroon. You have to bring the corpse of Felix Mumie. You have to bring the corpse of Amadou Ahidjo before we allow you to be buried. So that stay tuned. It's going to be very tough for Cameroon.
Bye-bye. 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 Okay.
What's up?
Yeah. But that's the technology.
Everything at Guinness.